Donna dragged a chipped wooden chair to the end of the table and dropped down. Fern and Vamp pulled their seats beside her. Luna leaned against the table edge, turning pages over the back of Ben's chair. No one had a class for another 2 hours, so they were just killing time. The books were tattered, their pages soft from decades of use. Corners were dog-eared, ink faded where sun had bleached the spines. Slanted afternoon light cut through the high library windows, gilding the air that hung over the table. Dust motes spun slow, lazy circles in the beam. Issies adefted, hatching the light before they drifted out of sight. A floorboard creaked a few rows over, but no one looked up. Donna turned a page, and the spine cracked with a soft, dry sound. Fern laughed at a panel and tapped the page with her finger to show Ben. The air was warm, still, thick with the smell of old paper. Then the light dimmed. First, the dust motes vanished from the beam. Then the pages turned gray. One by one, the friends stopped flipping. They looked up from their books. A solid shadow stretched across the whole table, cutting them off from the afternoon sun completely. Volta stood in the aisle, leaning against the oak bookshelf. She tapped her boot against the wooden floor once, slow and deliberate. "You said you wanted to help with research," she said. "Follow me." No one asked what kind of research. No one asked where they were going. They had all agreed days ago that any project Volta brought would be worth their time. They closed their comics one by one, slid them back into the library's beat-up lending rack, and stood. Volta turned and walked toward the back staircase, her boots clicking sharp against the tile. The friends fell in step behind her, the library's warm afternoon air already cooling as they moved away from the windows. Volta led them down one flight, then another, then a third. The overhead lights burned out at the second landing. By the third flight, the walls swallowed what little light filtered down from above. Ben pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and a harsh white beam cut through the dark. Dust particles swarmed the light as they stepped down. The hallway at the bottom smelled like damp concrete and forgotten cleaning supplies. Locked storage closets lined both sides, their metal doors tagged with faded yellow numbers. Volta kept walking straight to the end, where a heavy iron door blocked the hallway. She pulled a dented brass key from her pocket, twisted it into the lock. The lock clicked loud in the silence. She wrapped her hand around the iron handle and braced her shoulder against the door. The iron door swung inward with a low, grating screech. Cold air rolled out into the hallway, carrying a sharp, metallic tang that cut through the basement's damp smell. Volta stepped through first and reached for the light switch on the wall. A single bare bulb flickered to life, hanging from the low ceiling. The room was lined from floor to ceiling with heavy wooden shelves. Glass beakers and test tubes sat packed between leather-bound journals, their edges yellowed with age. Some of the journals had no titles on their spines at all. The ozone smell hit Donna first, sharp enough to make her eyes water. Fern leaned in to run a finger along a shelf and pulled it back covered in a fine layer of gray dust. Ben's boot kicked a loose cork across the concrete floor, the sound bouncing off the four walls. In the center of the room, a solid oak table stood clear of everything except one object. A thick book, wrapped in cracked black leather, sat flat on the wood, its cover worn smooth by time. Volta stepped back from the table and gestured with one hand for the group to come closer. "I found this last week in the university archives," she said. "It's not a normal book." Donna stepped forward, closing the distance between her and the table. She lifted one hand, hesitated for half a second, then let her fingertips brush the cracked leather cover. The moment her skin made contact, soft blue light seeped out from the cracks in the binding. It spread slow at first, then faster, bleeding across the tabletop. The pages began to turn. No hand touched them. No wind stirred the air. They flipped over one after another, faster and faster, the sound of turning paper rising to a sharp rustle in the silent room. The pages finally slammed to a stop. The blue light hit the ceiling and exploded outward, expanding so fast it swallowed the bare bulb, the shelves, the iron door, the whole room, in less than a second. The heat washed over the group first, burning cold on their cheeks. Then the air turned solid, pressing in from every direction. Volta was already at the edge of the table, but the light caught her too, wrapping around her boots before she could step back. Fern grabbed for Dona's wrist. Dona grabbed for Luna's. Ben locked his hand around Vamp's elbow. For half a second, they were all connected, a chain of bodies holding tight against the unknown. Then the floor disappeared. Donya's hand slipped out of Luna's grip. She twisted through empty space. No up, no down, just blue light burning behind her eyelids. The silence swallowed the rustle of pages, the creak of shelves, every sound they had ever known in that basement lab. She could not breathe. She could not think. Then, something hard and cold hit her shoulder. She rolled, and grit scraped against her cheek. The blue light faded fast, pulling back into the sky above her. Donna blinked salt out of her eyes. She pushed herself up on one elbow and looked around. The other 5 were scattered across the sand around her, all coughing, all pushing themselves up one by one. Salt stung her nostrils. A sharp wind pulled at her hair, cutting through the warm sweat left by the blue light. She looked up, and 50 yards ahead, a thick stone watchtower jutted straight up toward the gray, rolling clouds. A faint, steady light spun slow at its top, cutting through the fog rolling off the sea. The group brushed sand off their skin and got to their feet. They followed the shoreline inland for half an hour, stepping over tangled driftwood and cracked shell fragments until they rounded a sharp rocky outcrop. A small wooden cabin sat tucked against the rock, its planks rotting, its porch rail hanging loose on one side. A woman leaned against the remaining wood, waiting for them. She pushed off the rail and waved them inside. The cabin's floorboards creaked under every step. Half the roof tiles were gone, and the wind whistled through cracked window panes. Nova brewed mint tea over a rusted wood stove, the steam curling up toward the open gaps in the ceiling. She sat across from the group at a splintered pine table and reached down to pull a broken piece of wood onto the tabletop. The edge was splintered, crusted with salt, and scored with deep, ragged bite marks. "There's something down there," she said, and pointed through the broken window toward the churning gray sea. "It's not a fish. It's not anything natural. It tears apart fishing nets, sinks small boats, and drives every fish away from the coast. I haven't seen a full catch in 3 months. Any boat that goes out past the point doesn't come back. It lives in a sunken cave, 1,000 feet down, just off the shore." The group looked around the table at each other. Dona nodded first, then Fern, then Ben, then Vamp, then Luna. No one hesitated. They would go. They would stop it. Vamp pulled a small glass vial from her pocket, pulled the cork out with her teeth. Frown. She dripped one silver drop onto each of their tongues, then closed her eyes and mumbled a low, rolling spell. The air tingled around their throats. "It lasts 6 hours, Vamp said. "We can breathe underwater the whole time." They walked back down to the shore, the wind pushing at their backs. The water pulled at the sand at their feet, cold enough to make their ankles ache when they stepped in. They stopped at the edge and looked out at the gray, rolling waves. Nova gripped her glow stick tight and stepped forward first. Nova led the group down through the cold water. The light blue faded to deep indigo, then to total black, and only the pale green glow of Nova's stick cut through the dark. Water pressed against the group's ears, the pressure building with every kick of their legs. The cold seeped into their bones, slowing their strokes, making their muscles ache with every movement. An hour later, Nova stopped kicking. She hovered in place and lifted one hand to point. The dark opening of the cave gaped in the rock face ahead, its edges black and jagged, no light getting past the entrance. Nova pushed forward, her glow stick cutting through the entrance shadow, and the group followed close behind her. Donna reached for the rock wall beside the opening, her fingers brushing against slimy, wet moss. She braced herself to step inside. Something moved. It was not in the cave. It was behind them, below them, waiting in the dark outside the entrance. The water surged, fast and forceful, throwing the group off balance. The creature exploded upward, its 6 jaws snapping open and shut, each lined with rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. It was as long as a school bus, its black skin slippery and slick, and it moved faster than any of them expected. Donna threw herself backward against the rock, and a jaw snapped shut where her chest had been a split second before. Fern dodged left, kicking hard to get out of the way. Ben grabbed a loose rock from the rock face and threw it, hitting the creature right between two jaws. The creature reared back, all 6 jaws gaping open, ready to lunge again. The group had nowhere left to run. A silver blur cut through the dark water behind the creature. It moved so fast the water curved along its sides, leaving a faint trail of disturbed current. The swordfish exploded forward, straight into the creature's unprotected flank. Its hard, pointed snout drove deep between the creature's scales, and the creature roared, a vibration that shook the rock walls of the cave, sending loose pebbles tumbling from the ceiling. The creature twisted away from the group, snapping blindly at the swordfish instead of advancing for the kill. The impact threw the swordfish back a yard, but it did not retreat. It circled, waiting for another opening. Luna pressed her back against Donna's, one hand pressed to the bleeding cut on her arm. A sharp, warm tingle spread up from her fingertips, spreading through her wrist, into her shoulder. She pushed off the rock wall and stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the swordfish. The swordfish stopped circling. It turned toward her and held its position. Luna lifted her uninjured hand, palm out toward the silver body. She did not speak. The thought moved through the water, clear and direct. "Fuse with me," she thought. The swordfish nodded once, sharp and quick. It shot forward, straight into the light that had begun to glow from Luna's palm. A bright silver light exploded outward, wrapping both of them in a spinning cocoon of pure energy. The water around them glowed bright enough to push back the cave's darkness. The group scrambled back to avoid the flash, pressing against the rock wall. When the light faded, Luna stood in the water, her posture straight, her arms steady. A sharp, pointed snout extended from her right hand, hard and sharp as forged steel. She was ready. The creature roared again, the vibration rattling the group's teeth. It twisted away from the swordfish's wound and lunged back toward Luna, all 6 jaws snapping in a wild, uncontrolled arc. It was her, it was angry, and it wanted her dead first. Luna pushed off the cave wall with her left foot and darted to the side. The jaws snapped shut an inch from her shoulder, the rush of water pushing her hair back from her face. She kept moving, her new body light and fast, cutting through the current without resistance. The creature spun and snapped again, aiming for her midsection. She pivoted on one kick, the water turning with her, and the strike passed right through empty space. It lunged low this time, aiming for her legs. She kicked upward, lifted herself clear of the jaws, and drove a glancing blow off its snout with her new blade. The impact stung the creature, and it reared back, shaking its head in a rage. It had lost all sense of control. Every strike was wild, every lunge overcommitted, every twist leaving another opening Luna could exploit. She danced around its attacks, waiting, letting it burn through its strength. Blood clouded the water around it, seeping from the first wound in its flank, turning the dark water pink. The creature drew back one last time, every muscle coiling, all 6 jaws gaping open wide. It threw every ounce of its remaining strength into one final lunge straight at Luna's chest. It was exactly what she had been waiting for. She stepped inside the lunge, closed the distance between them in a single kick, and drove the pointed snout sword straight forward. The group paused, chests heaving even underwater, to catch their breath. Vamp checked the faint glow of the spell mark on her wrist and held up 5 fingers. The silver liquid's effect would last another 50 minutes. They still had time to get out. They tied the creature's body to a loose rock outcrop with what remained of Ben's rope to keep it from drifting into the open sea. Then they turned and kicked back toward the cave mouth, following Nova's glowing stick up through the dark water. The pressure lightened as they climbed. The black water faded back to deep blue, then to the pale, murky gray of the coastal shallows. One by one, their heads broke the surface. Salt water ran down their faces, and they gasped in the sharp, cold sea air. They swam the last 100 yards to the shore, pulled themselves up onto the wet sand, and collapsed for 5 minutes to catch their breath. The silver fusion faded from Luna's body as they climbed back up the shore, leaving her unharmed, the cut on her arm cleaned by salt water. They walked back to the Watchtower, slow and heavy, every muscle sore from the fight. The blue portal glowed steady in the empty room at the base of the tower, just as it had when they arrived. Nova went first, then Donna, Fern, Vamp, Ben, and Luna. Each stepped through the light and disappeared. They landed one by one on the cold stone floor of Volta's basement lab, right where the book had sent them off. The black book still lay open on the oak table, pages glowing faint blue. Nova brushed sand off her boots, slung her bag over her shoulder, and smiled. The group turned to look at Volta. "I'm coming with you," Nova said. "There's more work to do, right?" Volta closed the book slowly, the blue glow fading as the cracked leather cover clicked shut. She picked it up, carried it to the locked iron cabinet in the corner, and turned the key in the lock. She clicked the latch shut and turned back to face the room, to face all 7 of them waiting. She nodded once, sharp and clear. "Right," she said. "Let's get started."